Hey everybody, Jay Weidner here. Second part of my UFOs and cults program. Hang on one second. Everybody, if you can, please subscribe and share this because that's the only way that I can get past the YouTube algorithms. We're doing some really good work here lately, and we're going to be putting out some good videos in the future. One of the subjects, of course, that I've been interested in for a long time. Oh, by the way, the show today is going to be really weird. I've got a really strange story to tell you. It's a true story. It involves two presidents of the United States, and it has to do with UFOs and cults. So that's the second part of that show. But before I get started on that, I got a couple other things I want to talk about. One of the things I want to talk about is my interest in the fact that history is I think faked a little bit. And one of the things I use and I've been perplexed by is San Francisco, the history of San Francisco. So I bought this book, Photographs of San Francisco in the decade of the 1850s. Now, there's only 33 photographs, but it's interesting because look how built up. San Francisco had a population of 1,000 people, and in 1849, and by 1859 they had 10,000 people. So assuming that all these photographs were taken in 1859, look at all the buildup here. Look how built up the city is. Look at it. Look at these buildings. Look at them. These buildings. Look at this. Look at this strange cathedral. Doesn't have a crucifix on it. It's very strange. It's huge. It would take years to build that cathedral. And it would take a lot of guys. I'm sorry. One thing I know about is the construction of cathedrals. Look at this building. Look at that building. Look at that thing. A lot of these were destroyed in the Great Fire. And here's another one. Look at the buildup. In 10 years, it went from a town that should look like Deadwood, a mining town. I live in a mining town, by the way, that was built in the 1800s. And everything was just thrown up really fast and quick. Now, San Francisco's a mining town, but nothing is thrown up fast and quick. I mean, everything is there already. When the settlers arrived for the gold rush, this stuff looks like it was already there. Does that look like it was just built? Or does it look aged to you? They're saying that church is like less than 10 years old. Here's another one of the build out by the harbor. There's the ferry building. That build out. I'm going to put these up eventually. Here's another one of the city. All of this was built in 10 years. I mean, it would take 100,000 guys doing work, to do that. Remember, they don't have any electricity. There's no railroad. There's just horse and buggy. And I just find it incredible. Look at this. This is Market Street. Look at that. It's incredible. The other thing you'll notice is there's not many people in any of these shots. Or horses. You'd think that there would be horse crap everywhere and horses everywhere and buggies, but you really don't see much of anything in these photographs. It doesn't really look like there's very many people in San Francisco. I've got another book I was going to show you, but I decided not to, which is about the buildings, insane asylums. You know what? I will show it. Hang on. This is a really interesting book. It's called Madhouse, and it's about one of the subjects I'm really interested in now, which is these insane asylums that were put all over the United States in the 1800s, after 1860 or so. And these buildings that these insane asylums are put in are absolutely incredible. I mean, you wonder why you would put insane people into buildings that are actually, you know, look like they cost a lot of money to build. Um, not to get into also who the hell is determining who's insane or not. Psychiatry hasn't really been invented yet. Here's this building here. I hope you can see it. It's kind of a faded out photograph, but look at the size of that building. It's huge, covering acres of ground. And look at this one. These are all in New York. Look at that building. Why would you build a building like that to house people that are insane? And here's a really interesting picture. This is the inside of one of these places. Look at the high ceilings. Why would you waste all that heat? Heat rises. So why would you waste all the heat by having this huge high ceiling? It must have cost an absolute fortune to keep this warm in the winter. You don't see any fireplaces or anything either. Remember, this is the 1880s. There's nothing. Anyway, thought you'd like to see that. I'm totally fascinated by the weird build-out that America did following the Civil War and how quickly it got built out. And also the demographics, the shifting populations of New York in 1850 had a population of I don't know what it is, but a population of X. And by 1860, 80% of the population had left. Where did they go? Well, they went to the West, probably. It was part of the conquering of the West. And I now believe that, of course, the gold rush was bogus. There may have been gold discovered, and there certainly was gold in California, but the rumor of gold was a propaganda. It was just to get people out there to the West, and it worked. I want you to know that tomorrow, it will be February 2nd at 2 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, on the website portal2ascension.com, Corey will be doing a Q&A. And I invite all of you to, you have to be cleared, so I can't get in there because they'll know it's me. But if you guys want to ask Corey some pertinent questions and you don't fall out on his radar, then I think you guys should. Give Corey some questions. Ask him why he keeps telling people that he got me fired from Gaia. Ask him why he spreads such terrible things about people that disagree with him. I think it's a really good thing. The bad part is that he scheduled this exactly during the Super Bowl. Now, that's called a limited hangout. So, you know what that is. In other words, he's hanging out, but because it's during the Super Bowl, it's going to be a limited hangout. So let's break through the barriers and let's ask Corey some questions. I can't do it, but you guys can. I want to also say that Stina Bobina is going to be on next week. We've got a couple of bombshells we're going to drop. Kaboom! And that should be fun. And we always have a good laugh together. And now I want to get to the subject of today's talk, which is about another cult and UFOs. And this one's a weird one. Maybe one of the weirdest stories I've ever heard. So one of the things I always had trouble with when I was first starting the show, Reality Check, was that Groovy Bean, a.k.a. Yvonne Palermo, was always afraid and always expressing her fear of what we were doing. And I didn't really ever understand it. And eventually I got it that she was really afraid, and I realized that I had to go on alone because I didn't want to cause her to have all these fears by helping me do this show. But when I started looking in to these cults, these UFO cults, I got scared. I got to be honest with you. I finally figured out why she was so scared. And it's because there's so many dead bodies around every cult that I look at. And the leaders never seem to ever get convicted for these dead bodies. So, Elijah Muhammad when Malcolm X turned against Nation of Islam, Elijah Muhammad probably didn't go to the members of Nation of Islam and say, we got to kill Malcolm X. But what he probably did was he said, Malcolm's a problem and we need to take care of it. Something like that, right? And then two members said, we got to do what our leader says. And so they killed Malcolm X. I don't know if that's how it happened, but I suspect that's how it happened. And so we can see that the cult leader can give unsubstantiated orders. In other words, there's no way to find an actual order, but he can suggest that something should be done. And then the crazy cult person goes out and does it. And that's what I think scared Groovy so bad, was that one of Corey's crazy people would come after her. She lived alone. She didn't have any protection except for 2 dogs, thank goodness. And so I think that's what scared her. And now as I look at cults and examine cults, and I realize here I am talking about cults, I've exposed NASA. I've gone up against the New World Order for almost 30 years now. I'm in 28th year of going public with my findings and my name. And I've never really been that afraid, but the exposing cults makes me afraid. It makes me like I don't know if I'm going to offend them or not. And they're so easily offended, and they have such a little sense of humor that even if I joke, it may be taken wrong. So this is actually some of the scariest stuff and weirdest stuff I've ever looked at. And so now I understand, exactly why she was so afraid. So today I'm going to talk about a cult, UFO cult. But because of the censorship on this network, I'm going to have to use some code words. Because you can't, YT, which is the network I'm on, doesn't like when citizens talk about current political affairs. They frown on that now. They used to love it, but now they frown on it. So now if you type in something about anything, impeachment or whatever, you're going to get on YouTube, you're going to get CBS, NBC, ABC, Fox News, and all the regular ones. You can, maybe by page 5, you'll finally find some alternative voices, but they're doing their best to subdue it. I don't talk about politics really very much, so I'm not really worried about that. But today, when I'm talking about this subject, I'm going to be bringing up people that if I use their names, it could be interpreted by the AI algorithm that's watching everything that I'm talking about contemporary politics when I'm not. So, from now on, the network we're on will now be referred to as YT. The 44th President of the United States will now be known as O. And the 45th President of the United States will now be known as T. I don't think there's anything else I have to code word through, but I do use these 2 gentlemen in the telling of this story, so you're going to have to let me do it in code so I don't get knocked off YouTube or get whatever they do with people who are talking about politics, because this isn't about politics. And it's just another matter-of-fact kind of thing that I'm doing. Okay, so let's see here. Go to here. All right. Now I'm going to be doing a little bit of reading here. This is my writing, and then I'll break free and go back to the writing. But I do the writing just because I want to tell this in the right order, because it's so really very interesting. Okay, this religion was founded by an Indonesian in the 1920s by a man named Muhammad Subud, and I'm not even going to try the last name. We shall call him Subud. Subud was born in 1901. When he was 17 years old, he was out for an early morning walk when he suddenly saw a light in the sky above him. As soon as he noticed the light noticed him. The light came close to Subud and hovered just overhead. As it did, Subud felt a bolt of electricity shoot through his body. He thought he was having a heart attack. Subud finally fell to the ground, where he passed out for a long period of time. During this time, Subud had a spiritual vision that changed his life. After he recovered from the incident with the UFO, Subud started a new religion or cult in Indonesia called Subud. I'm going to call it Subud. Subud. Yeah, I think that's how they pronounce it. This cult grew quickly, and by the 1960s, there were tens of thousands of followers of Subud. Subud believed that the light in the sky had imbued him with higher spiritual energy, and that his duty was to transmit this energy to his devoted followers. Eva Bartok was an actress in Hollywood in the 1950s, and she became enamored with the Subud and his cult. She was pregnant, but she had a cyst, and the doctors told her that she would have to end the pregnancy. She went to Subud, who physically examined her and psychically examined her. He told her that she would be fine and to have the baby. And that is how the love child of Eva and Frank Sinatra were born, Diana Sinatra. Eva made headlines when she told the world that Subud had cured her of cancer. That made the world take notice of this emerging cult. Here's where it gets good. In the book, A Singular Woman, the untold story of O's mother by Janie Scott, we discover that Stanley Ann Dunham, O's mother, was also in the Subud cult. Scott tells the reader several times that she was a member of this group. It should also be mentioned that the Subud cult has three main headquarters: Indonesia, Chicago, and Hawaii, three places associated with our 44th president. In 2011, or maybe late 2010 actually, Citizen T began making public statements about why O never released his birth certificate. It's true that early in his career, O claimed to have been born in Kenya. O had been pressured since he first ran in 2008 to release the certificate, but it wasn't until T got involved that the pressure increased. And it's just interesting that, T is involved in this. In that year, 2011, Loretta Fuddy assumed the position of Director of State Department of Health in the state of Hawaii, the state where O was born. Why is this important? Because Miss Fuddy was also a member of the Subud cult. Not just any member. She served as chairwoman of Subud USA from 2006 to 2008. Here is an email from within the Subud cult. Okay, you need letters are a little small. Let me put on my glasses. Ariane, no second name, wrote to me to say, talk to Iran Paulette, who is reading the book about Obama's mother and has already run into several literal mentions of Subud. I remember the late Mansour Maderos questioning he knew her in Indonesia, and he is mentioned in the book. I can't help wondering if we'll get inquiries about Subud, since it is mentioned often in a book, which probably will be widely read. It is also a delicious fact that our Subud sister, Ms. Fuddy, just was appointed to her post in the health department in Hawaii in time to be involved in the documentation of the fact that Obama was born there, unquote. Remember, Mrs. Fuddy is now a very important person, Miss Fuddy is in a very important position in the government of Hawaii, where Obama says he was born. Oops, shouldn't have said that word. T is upping the pressure on a daily basis for O to show the certificate. We'll get back to that in a second. Miss Fuddy, we'll get back to. One of the things that Subud would do is to give new names to the adherents to his spiritual message. For instance, Loretta Fuddy was known as Deliana by the members of Subud. We also know that Subud himself visited Hawaii a couple of times in the late 1950s and early 1960s. That's going to become important. Of course, Stanley Ann Dunham was attending the University of Hawaii at the time. She would meet Barack Obama Sr. around 1960, and that led to an affair, and they got married. He was from Kenya, studying at Harvard. O was the son of the two, or was he? O Sr. was already married and split from Ann. She divorced him, Anne, as she preferred to be called later, met Lolo Sotoro, who was an Indonesian. They married and she moved to Indonesia with her young son O, now called Barry. In 1968, a curious thing occurred. Anne wanted to come back to Hawaii for a visit, and she applied at the passport office in Jakarta, in Indonesia. On the back of the form, she was asked if there was anyone else she was traveling with who would also need a passport, and she wrote down O's name, and then the strange word Sobarka, Sobarka, Soebarkah. To make things weirder, she then crossed the box out. Remember, I told you that Subud would give names to his followers. Is Sobarka O's cult name? Why did she cross it out? Was she going to leave her 8-year-old son without a proper passport? Perhaps she thought that adding the Indonesian name Sobarka, she could slide by the passport office without showing them his birth certificate. When that did not work, she crossed it out and was forced to come up with another plan? I don't know. Back to Loretta Fuddy, who became the director of the state health department in Hawaii. Oh, sorry about that. In January 2011. A few months later, in May 2011, she would release O's birth certificate. The certificate is really strange, and I've looked at it. It was released on Adobe Illustrator with layers. Of course, that did not exist in 1961. There's enough weirdness around the birth certificate document for one to think it might be fake. And certainly, an old friend of mine, Doug Vogt, is an expert in this stuff. He has declared it to be a fake. In December 2013, Miss Fuddy became the only victim of a small plane crash in the ocean near Hawaii. And this is a really weird thing, because when this first happened, somebody on this little small airplane took out their cell phone camera, and while everyone is floating in the water waiting for rescue, the person, whoever it was, videotaped the people that survived. They're all in rafts and things and floating in the water. And the problem with this video, and I cannot find it anymore, as we know, they're really hiding things now, so you can't find things like you used to. There was no Miss Fuddy. Everybody was there but her. And now the claim that she died of arrhythmia, from the stress of the plane crash sometime after it crashed and they were getting rescued. Yet I have seen a cell phone video of the people who survived this plane crash, and she isn't in there. So I don't know what it means. Just telling you. Okay, before going on, it's time for me to introduce you to Subud himself. Here's a picture of him. I'll put this up. Does he look familiar to you? How about this? It's an internet meme. What's going on here? Okay, everything I say from now on is speculation, but it does make sense of the story. It has been long speculated on the internet that Stanley Ann Dunham was an intelligent asset or agent from the start. Because of racism within the confines of the CIA, FBI, and other intel agencies, they had no way to infiltrate the growing Marxist political movements in the 1950s and 1960s. In other words, there were literally no black people working for the FBI or the CIA in the 50s until they started liberating it in the mid-60s. So, here's another reason why racism is so bad. How your law enforcement people are supposed to work if you can't even, hire people of all the races that are in the population, right? So this is a really, really a good example of how racism really works against the system. So it is well known that these agencies decided to use white women to infiltrate these groups. It is also well known that besides O, Sr., and Dunham also was a lover of Marxist Frank Marshall. In fact, there are some very racy pictures have emerged of a very naked Ann Dunham in Marshall's house in Hawaii. What if Ann Dunham had multiple assignments? She was to find out what O Sr. was doing in the United States besides going to college. She was also to find out what Frank Marshall was up to and possibly even infiltrate this emerging cult called Subud. probably using the same technique that she used on everyone else, sex. Perhaps she discovered she was pregnant and did not know who the father was. Perhaps she did go to Kenya thinking the baby belonged to O Sr. As the boy aged, it became apparent to Ann Dunham that he was not the son of O. His skin was too light and he had the features of Subud himself. In fact, is that the real reason that she went to Indonesia in 1967? Had it become apparent that this was Subud's son, so she took him there so that Subud would support him and also help her? We'll never know the answers to these questions. What happened to Laura Fuddy on the plane? What really happened to her? Finally, remember Bo Bergdahl? No, he was the Army deserter that Barack Obama inexplicably gave a pardon to, causing a huge uproar as 2 soldiers had died looking for the missing soldier. Bergdahl is a member of the Subud cult. So, a UFO has an encounter with a guy who starts a cult because he had a religious experience, which eventually this all turns into creating one of the most important political figures in history. Oh. And there we go. That's my story. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Please spread this far and wide, and tell your friends. Question and answer Corey tomorrow, and Stina Bobina next week coming up. I'm Jay Weidner, and really and truly I want to thank you for watching.